So hello everyone, welcome to 0200x full stack web development cohort, and today we are going to learn about JavaScript foundations. So week 1 would be divided into 4 to 5 parts of videos, for example week 1.1, 1.2 and so on. And I hope by the end of the week 1 you would be aware of JavaScript jargons and JavaScript interview questions and also enough JavaScript to start web development. So let's understand what are languages and why there are so many languages. So, to answer this question, we know that our computer is made of two main components. One is CPU and another one is SSD. SSD is our hard disk. So, all our applications like VLC Player, Google Chrome, Zoom, GTA 6 or any games that we play resides on the SSD. So, to run this, to execute this, we need to execute these all applications in the CPU. These applications are only stored in SSD but executed or ran on the CPU. So how does we execute all these programs like VLC player on the CPU? Because CPU is ultimately a hardware. CPU will only understand zeros and one. By zero it means off and by one it means on. So CPU will only understands in the language of binary, which is zeros and ones. So all our applications are written in some kind of languages. So even VLC player is written in some kind of language like Java, C++. Thankfully VLC player is open source, so you can browse it. And so there should be some mediator between our applications and the CPU, which would help to convert our source code of our applications into binaries, which is zeros and ones, so our hardware CPU can understand it. So compiler is that component which helps our source code to get converted into zeros and ones so that they can be interpreted by the CPU. So each and every languages have their own particular compiler. So this is the reason why we do have all these different languages. Each language have their own benefit over the other. Each language will have their own compiler which will help to interpret the source code and convert it into the binary or the machine code for its CPU. So languages are used to write applications. Developer write high level code with these languages, and every language has a compiler which converts the developer's code into zeros and ones. So now let's understand compiler with help of simple C++ program, and let's divide this into three steps. So step 1 is write a simple C++ program of hello world. Later on, compile it with a particular command in the command line. You don't need to focus on what command I am using. I'm just using I'm just initializing my compiler to compile my source code into machine language so that I will get an exe. So as soon as I get the exe, I will simply run it and I will get my output whatever I have written in my source code, which is hello world. So what you can do is that suppose you create a game and you write the source code for your game. Now you compile it, you will generate an exe. Now you don't need to give the source code to your friends so that if your friends can play the game in their system, you just need to pass on the exe which was generated with help of compiler. So here is my simple C++ program which I have wrote, and this simply prints the hello world into the console. So this is the source code for it, and if I need to convert this source code into the machine language, which is the binary, I just need to call my compiler. From the command line, I execute this particular command which calls my compiler and converts my source code into the machine language, and this is simply converting my code.cpp file into an exe called as temp. So coming back to the folder, as you can see right now there is only a cpp folder available here, which is my source code. I will execute this command, and as you can see the temp.exe is been generated with help of the compiler. As soon as I run it, you will see that the hello world gets printed into the console. So this is how compilation in C++ takes place. C++ compilation is majorly divided into three steps. Step 1 is writing your entire source code at once, and once you are completed and done with writing your entire source code, the compilation of your entire source code happens at once. It does not go line by line. Once you are done writing the entire source code, the compilation takes place after you call the compilation command from your command line terminal, and the compilation of your entire source code happens at once and the binary or the machine language code is being generated. So this is the reason why C++ is called as compiled languages. But JavaScript is different. Compilation of JavaScript happens in a bit of a different way. JavaScript is an interpreted language. What do we mean by interpreted language? So as you can see over here, the JavaScript compilation happens in two major steps. First, you write the code, and step 2, you simply run the code. So do you mean that compilation does not happens in this particular JavaScript compilation? Does it means that JavaScript source code directly runs on the RAM? No, that's not the case. The compilation happens, but compilation happens line by line. Whenever you write console.log hi hello world, the compilation of this particular single line happens and the logic is been visible in the browser. Then the compilation of the second line happens and the output of the second line is visible on the browser. Hence, this is an interpreted language. JavaScript is an interpreted language. The compilation happens line by line rather than at at once. So let's go into the code. This is a JavaScript code which I have written. It's simply consoles.log hi hello worlds and hi hello world 1. So as you can see, if I try to run this, hi hello worlds printed twice. But suppose we try to do try to achieve any error over here. So now let's try to rerun this program. This time we are trying to achieve an error over here. So I will simply rerun it. As you can see, we have got an error. So, but you can also observe over here that hi hello worlds and hi hello world got printed. And after on the third line, we got an error that the console.log and A is not referenced properly. So over here, as you can observe that the line number 1 did not had any error. So JavaScript compiler interpreted this particular line, compiled it, and we got its per individual output. In the second line, you can also see there was no error over here. So JavaScript compiler compiled it, and we also got an output for this particular line as well. But in the third line, we had an output of reference error. So over here, what we observed that this particular line was unable to get compiled by JavaScript compiler, and we encountered an error over here. So what we conclude from this is that JavaScript is interpreted language. It compiles line by line rather than going a block of entire source code at once, which happens in case of C++. If there is any error in the C++ code, so let me remove std over here and try to save it. And as you can see, we have got an error. And if I try to compile this particular C++ code, there is a huge chances that we don't even get its equivalent machine language for this particular code, and we won't even be able to compile this C++ code as well. But this is not the case in the JavaScript. We are able to compile the code partially. First two lines get executed properly, and we get the error in the third line. This is the reason why JavaScript is an interpreted language, and this is the reason why we are able to run our code partially. And but this is not in the case of the C++. We are unable to compile our partial code in C++, but whereas we are able to compile our partial source code in JavaScript. I hope this topic is clear to you. If you have any doubts, you can also add your questions in the comment. I would try my best to solve them. So what did we learn so far? JavaScript is an interpreted language. C++ is an compiled language. Interpreted languages go line by line while executing. It can partially run until an error comes. So why is JavaScript better than other languages? Browser can only understand HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So yes, nowadays whatever websites that we are seeing in our day-to-day basis are written in JavaScript. 99% of websites have JavaScript in them. So as you see that browsers only understand JavaScript, and suppose in future someone decides that we don't have to use JavaScript anymore into the browsers and the websites, then what would happen? 99% of those websites which are using JavaScript, and all the browsers which is understanding JavaScript to render the website, all these websites and browser would go to scrap, and we need to create new browsers and new websites from the scratch. So unless and until the browsers exist and all the websites exist in the world, JavaScript will always coexist with it. So JavaScript is a safer language to learn, and thanks to Node.js, JavaScript can also be used for backend development as well. So suppose if you only have learned one single programming languages, you only know one single programming language. In that case, with help of just JavaScript, you can create an entire full stack web application with front end in also JavaScript framework and backend in also a JavaScript framework with help of Node.js. So JavaScript is a dynamic typed language. So let's understand dynamic type language with help of C++ example, because C++ is a static type language, and in C++ you need to first declare your variable. You suppose if you want to store a integer value into a variable name called number, then you need to declare it that the the number variable would be of type integer, and only integer values will get accepted into this number variable. And in the suppose in the future, if you try to assign any string value to your number variable, then this will result into an compilation error. You always need to declare first what your variable would be and what kind of values it would accept, and you need to be consistent that if the suppose your variable has been declared as integer, then you always need to be consistent that whatever values would come into that particular variable will always be integer in the future or further part of your code. So this is static type language, but this is not in the case of dynamic type language, which is JavaScript. You don't need to mention what kind of uh, type of values would be coming into your variable. You can simply use let keyword. We will go in deep of for the let and the where and the const keywords of the JavaScript in the future videos. But over here, just to understand dynamic language, please focus on the necessary part only. As you can see, I will assign the value 5 over here in the number variable. So now in the further part of our code, if I try to assign our number variable with a string value, then it will also accept the string value in it, and it will override the value 5 or the integer value with the new string value provided to it. So next is JavaScript is single threaded in nature. By single threaded, I mean is that JavaScript executes one line of code at a time. As you can see over here, it executes the line number 1 and then line number 2 and then line number 3. So does this means that the CPP code runs differently? It does not work line by line. If you write this particular code in the C++ or in Java, it will also be single threaded in nature. But there are ways in C++ and Java to make our code multi-threaded with a different syntax. You can possibly achieve multi-threading as well, but in case of JavaScript, there we can't achieve it because JavaScript is single threaded. It is like a single line or a single road, one thing at a time. So as you can see over here, this is the specifications of my system. I have 12 cores, and these are the cores over here. So on each core, an application is going to run. On core number 1, suppose my Chrome is running. On core number 2, suppose another application like Zoom is running, and so on. So suppose if I write any program with JavaScript, then I won't be able to achieve multi-threading. By multi-threading, I mean utilization of different cores at same time. So if I try to write any application with JavaScript, then what would happen that if my JavaScript program is running on core number 1, this core number 1 will get over exhausted, and because all the operations would be happening on the core number 1 itself. And this is the reason why JavaScript is not great for to make more scalable applications. We can achieve multi-threading in JavaScript as well. We will see that in further videos, but uh, originally JavaScript is single threaded in nature, and this is not in this case of Java or C++. With the help of Java, you can utilize a different cores of your system by with help of multi-threading, but in JavaScript only one core would be used at a time. So that's all for this video, guys. In this video we learned what is JavaScript language and its basic nature. In the next video we will start with basic JavaScript programming. The topics which we are going to cover in the next video is simple and complex primitive JavaScript types, functions, what is if-else conditional statements in JavaScript, and then we will also learn about loops in JavaScript. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Please stay tuned for the next video.